Hey guys, Nerdking 101 here, and today we're returning for a theory review of the theory we recently finished reacting to on the channel, Arcane. To be entirely honest with you, I've been wanting to review Arcane since the first episode. I almost thought about doing episode by episode reviews because I just have so much to say about this masterpiece of a show. I'm also very curious to see what other people think, but I don't want to watch any other reviews until I do this. So I welcome you all to my official review of the Netflix series, Arcane.
I love you more than you'll ever know. You say that you don't like taking pictures, but that's okay cause I don't need a photograph. Cause in my heart an image of you lingers. It's a real film that's burning me with the past. I try to act like I don't miss you, but I know deep down you were lonely too. We both never meant to hurt the other, but we did some things that we can never undo. Oh, can you give me one last kiss? Set a fire with only your lips. There is no forgetting this.
I think Arcane's greatest strength right off the bat is though it is based on lore from League of Legends, you do not need to know anything about League of Legends to watch this show. While I'm absolutely sure knowing about League of Legends allows you to enjoy the Easter eggs that are definitely in this show and point at your screen and go, oh, I know who that is, you don't need any of that knowledge from the game to watch this. The show does a fantastic job with its world building and introducing the characters in a way where even with no knowledge of the video game, you can learn about them, and even people who have played the video game don't always know what's going on because this game is a prequel. So they'll introduce characters like Powder, and players of League of Legends will wonder if it's Jinx, but they can't be sure. But I'm only going to be talking about the game one more time later in the video. Let's jump in to the first thing worth talking about in regard to this show, which is the animation. The animation for this game is spectacular. The animation for Arcane was done by, and I apologize if I butchered it, Portrayal Production, who absolutely killed it. I'd love if they just released a video or a statement just including all the animators who worked on the project and what scenes they did, because my god, an animation breakdown in the style of thing people do with Dragon Ball Super or One Piece or Naruto would be phenomenal for Arcane. You can see constantly throughout the reactions up until the very end, I am floored by the animation. Normally I'm surprised by the animation in the beginning, and then I learn to accept it, I get used to it. This was a show that constantly throughout the reaction, you can see me just being shocked by how good it looks. The same can be said for the music. The music in this show is fantastic. Everything from the production standpoint in Arcane is phenomenal. Everything from, as I said, the animation to the music to the art style to the sound design. It all stands out as being damn near perfect. And I don't normally say that about shows. There are very few shows, even my favorite anime, Evangelion, which I would consider a masterpiece, I would give like a 9 out of 10, or I could have issues with the animation in certain areas. There are very few shows, if any shows, that I can say I have no issue with any of the production throughout the entire product. There are certainly plenty of anime movies where I can say I have no problem with the animation throughout the film. I mean, I have a million problems with Naruto The Last, but that movie looks fantastic start to finish. But this is a 9-episode TV show that makes that movie look like garbage. It is phenomenal. The whole time you're just going to be in shock. Now on to something I really liked about the show is that the show keeps you guessing. I think in the very beginning, the tone is set and the kind of show you think it's going to be is in no way what it ends up being. In the beginning of the show, you can see it in my reaction, I think you are immediately led to believe this is going to be a very Avatar The Last Airbender-esque show, if not slightly more mature, but in terms of it's going to be about the kids coming together. Powder's going to be the main character who learns how to use the magic orb she stole in combination with her little bombs, and they're going to lead like a rebellion, and they're going to like overthrow Topside or bring peace between the Undercity and Topside. Like, you just think that's where it's going. The setup for Powder being a main character who may also suffer from mental illness is fantastic, because there are small signs in the early episodes that Powder may be mentally ill. There's stuff where she snaps at people, where she acts strangely, but then the big scene when you realize something's definitely off is when V leaves to go save Vander in episode 3, and she has a full-blown mental breakdown. But even when she has her mental breakdown in episode 3 in the beginning, you're led to believe that this is going to be a story where like she goes, she saves them, and she's going to be our hero, and one of the things she has to struggle with will be her mental illness. The show does a great job of setting it up that V is almost like, if you've seen Gurren Lagann, the Kamina to Powder's Simone, and Powder will also be struggling with mental illness as well as growing up and growing into a hero. And then the show immediately flips it all on its head. Because you're watching the show, the tone seems very Avatar-esque, you're expecting Powder to have plot armor, you're expecting her bomb to work in episode 3, and then it does, but it doesn't work out in a heroic main character, the triumphs of Powder kind of way. No, it kills all her friends and family. And it's just an immediate subverting of your expectations, when you immediately start thinking the show will then go in one direction, and it will be about maybe saving Powder, redeeming Powder, saving her from the darkness, and then that's still not really what the show is doing. That's kind of where it goes, but it takes Powder and it goes so far down the irredeemable rabbit hole with her that it makes you question, can she be redeemed? But it also makes you feel bad for her at the same time. But I actually want to do a whole video about Powder and Jinx later on. I want to do an entire video. I will talk about her a bit later, but I want to talk about the other characters first, because Powder is so fascinating and complex, and she's easily my favorite character in the show. But moving past how well this show subverts expectations, I want to move on to the characters, as I just said, and talk about my least favorite character in the show, Jace. And Jace is actually tied to one of my problems with the show, one of the few things that I think stops it from being perfect at all times, which is that Jace and a lot of the political storylines in Topside just didn't work for me. They're not interesting and they're boring. Jace, for me, at least compared to the other characters, especially the Undercity characters, who are these underdogs that you're constantly rooting for, and that they do a really good job of forming a really strong connection between you and those Undercity underdog characters. A lot of which are characters like Powder, who are suffering from severe mental illness, and then you cut to guys like Jace, who just don't feel as strong. You also know in the back of your head that this is a guy who's lived with a silver spoon in his mouth his entire life, which isn't a bad thing. There are plenty of interesting fictional characters who live with a silver spoon in their mouth. I think the problem with Jace for me is that Jace was simply boring. I felt like a lot of his scenes after the time skip. I enjoyed him in episode 2. But after the time skip, Jace became incredibly boring to me. His conflict about his morality and protecting the city versus doing what's right and using his technology in the right way versus the wrong way, what is best for the people, just didn't hit home for me. It's not even that it's bad, because I do think it's all well done, it's well animated, it's well voice acted, the sound design is great. On paper, everything about it is great. I don't even think the writing is bad. I just personally found it to be far less compelling than anything going on with V or Powder or Caitlyn. I did, however, really enjoy Victor. I actually wish we had gotten more of Victor. I really liked that throughout the series, you realize one of the reasons he's so dedicated to Hextech is because he believes Hextech can save him. And I was really upset. I liked Victor from the moment I saw him. I loved the way his voice actor does his voice. I love everything about him. I think he's really cool. I think the idea of making one of the scientists a cripple from the Undercity is fantastic. One of my favorite scenes is when Jace takes this horrible, nasty, almost discrimination-like shot at people that are from the Undercity, and Victor just gets up and it's like, I'm from the Undercity, and he just storms off. And I'm just like, that is such a great scene, and I think it really encapsulates one of the themes from the show very well, which is that even the best of people from Topside come here and they look down on the people of the Undercity. Even the best people who will befriend people from the Undercity, look down on them. Jake, despite his friendship with Victor, can't help but look down on people that came from the same place as Victor. And it's not just turned into the people of top side are jerks. No, because when Caitlyn goes there, it becomes abundantly clear that she's ignorant of it. None of them realize just how bad things are in the Undercities, and even the ones who do are raised to not care, to look at these people as lesser, to look at it like it's not their problem. Moving on to another character I adore is Vander. Vander is only in the show for 3 episodes, and he's one of my favorite characters. He's just so cool. He's so fascinating. I like how we don't really get a backstory for him. It's all hinted at. There's no flashback where we get to see Vander being this hardened badass. It's the same thing like about Iroh from Avatar. We don't get to see the old Vander. We get to learn a lot about him and about the mistakes he made and the good things he did, but we don't get to see it. He's just an incredibly likable, kind character, and you're always wondering what he's going to do next. The show does a great job once again of making you wonder, is he going to fight back? What's he gonna do? They really sell how much he cared about Violet and Powder very well in a very short period of time. And this man is their father, and throughout the rest of the show, you can see that aspect of him in them. This guy is their dad, and he loves them to death. And you can tell he wasn't willing to really fight anymore. He wanted to avoid it, but you can tell that the first time he really fights in the show is when Violet is in danger. The moment the kids are in danger, you can tell that's the one thing he's willing to fight over. There's almost a point when you question if he really means it when he says he would do this for anyone, or if to some degree his daughters are special, and maybe he would go farther for them than he does for other people. He also had just one of the coolest death scenes ever. Everything about his death is so awesome, and I especially love how even when he's losing control and like hulking out, he still protects Violet. And I like how even at the end, where I think he kind of knows Powder may have had something to do with the explosion, he tells Violet to protect her. But moving on to the next character I want to talk about, which is Silco. By the way, I'm not going to talk about all the characters, there's too many. I'm only going to be talking about a few of them, and I think I'll be doing Arcane videos in the future, talking about more of the characters. But moving on to Silco, I hate Silco. I do not like this guy. I see some people saying they have sympathy for him. Nah, I hate this guy. I think he's a piece of garbage. Now, I do like the writing for Silco. I'm not saying I think he's badly written. He's a masterpiece of a character. I just hate him. I know there are some people who really like the relationship he has with Powder. I don't. I really dislike him as a person. Now, I like him as a villain. I think he really did a great job of being an antagonist. He's scary. He's hateable. But I also like that they do reveal, really at the bridge scene. Some people say it's in the final scene at the tea party, but it's really at the bridge scene when you realize that this guy does actually love Powder like a daughter, which I think makes me dislike him even more, because the way he manipulates Powder is what makes me dislike him. Now, I'm going to get into this more when I do my Powder video, but Powder's my favorite character in the show, and the way he manipulates her and then claims to still care about her, the way he ruins her, is just so twisted, because he genuinely loves this kid. Like, he genuinely loves this little girl, and he also does not see any problem with the way he destroyed this sweet, innocent little girl. He's like, he loves her, but he had no problem. He does not see that he had done anything wrong. He corrupted her, he destroyed her, and yet he still loves her. And at the end, he straight up said he's ready to give up his goals for her. Because for all intents and purposes, the villain in this show gets what they want. He wins. All he needs to do is give the Topsiders, give Powder to the council. And he says in the final episode, he's not going to do that. He said he would never do that. He said he had everything he wanted dangled in front of him. And of course he considered it. But then he considered it for more than a minute, and he was like, I can't do that. I love this girl. He couldn't do it. And I think that just makes it so much more tragic when Powder does kill him, because he's the last thing that in her eyes she has. Now, we, of course, as fans, know she still has Violet. We know that. But Powder is so far gone, she's so lost, she's so ill, that she doesn't see, that she can't understand with all the voices in her head telling her not to trust Violet. she doesn't see it that way. So when she kills him, it makes it all the more tragic, because not only is he dying at the hands of the girl that he loves, she's killing her father. She sees him as her second father. The entire sequence is just so well done, but it doesn't change the fact that I personally don't like him. I do kind of see him as a groomer. Now, he didn't groom her like sexually, because there's a couple scenes, especially early on in the mid-season portion, where she gets really touchy-feely with him. And I remember being worried, oh my god, is this gonna be like a Terra Deathstroke situation? For those of you that know DC Comics, is this gonna be weird? And it's not. It's not weird. It actually really plays into how sick Powder is. She's so touchy-feely with this man she considers her father because she had such serious issues, which is clearly stuff like schizophrenia. She clearly had some degree of emotional attachment or emotional dependency disorder. And this is why I want to talk about Powder in her own separate video, because mental illness plays a huge part in it, and I need to do research, and I want to properly inform myself on this very sensitive topic before I really go into it. But personally, I could not help but when I looked at Silco at the end, and seeing a man who groomed a little girl into a killer, and then while he was sadistically grooming the kid, somehow ending up loving her. But it doesn't change the fact that he is a man who started out as, in my opinion, a straight-up groomer. He really manipulated this kid, and I feel like that's the thing that bothers me the most, because all the other stuff he does is very stereotypical villain stuff. And I think the thing that made him go from a villain that I thought was a good villain to being a despicable character in my eyes was that. Now, moving on to the next character I want to talk about is Caitlyn. Caitlyn is great. I adore Caitlyn. First of all, I swear to God, when she first showed up, I thought she was like 5 or 6 years younger. I thought she was like 8. One thing I will say about this show is I have no idea on the character's ages. One of the reasons I hate Silco so much is I legitimately thought Powder was like 6 or 7, which I actually think she was more like 8 or 9, but I legitimately thought she was like 5 or 6. But Caitlyn is fantastic. I love Caitlyn. I don't exactly love her when she first shows up, but after the time skip, the whole concept of the rich kid going out and becoming a law enforcement officer to help people and going against her rich, spoiled, silver spoon in their mouth parents is just immediately how you make me like a character. I mean, it's pointed out right in that very episode that her mother was not happy that she didn't choose a more high-class job or career path. And she's like, she wants to help people. And I think that's what makes her so compelling, and that she's just genuinely a really good person. In fact, she's one of the few characters, besides for Vander, that I would say I would refer to as a good person. She's also really cool, and I think it's a really good pairing for her to be with Vi, because Vi, of course, is very close combat with her gauntlet, and then you have Caitlyn, who uses the rifle, and is really good at it. I also think that it's also almost symbolic that the two people Vi had worked with very closely, these two girls she becomes incredibly close with during the show, Powder and Caitlyn, are both expert marksmen. Which may of course be a total coincidence, but I noticed that. I loved Caitlyn, I loved her interaction with Vi, and while I honestly can't pick a favorite, there's too many amazing scenes in this show. The scene when she and Vi are in Undercity and she's experiencing it firsthand, she's realizing how messed up it is, and she's realizing that while she's been eating 5 meals every day, these people have been living like this, and she's immediately horrified, and she immediately, like, something has to happen. This has to change. She immediately has Vi back, and she immediately wants to help her and her people, and I love it. I also love that she seems to have some degree of empathy for Powder. Like, obviously she views Powder as a criminal and a terrorist that needs to be taken in or taken down, but you do see a degree of when Vi said, "That's my sister," that she had the moment where she's like, something is wrong with this girl. I like that she immediately isn't like, the crazy person needs to die. Because while I don't want to go too heavily into it here, I want to talk briefly about how this show portrays mental illness, because this has less to do with Powder and more to do with just an overall compliment to the show's writing, which is that a lot of shows and storylines, when they create villains like this, when they have somebody really lose their marble, it's typically done in a way where it makes it seem like they become irredeemable and they're just a bad person now. They're crazy, so they're bad. They don't feel any empathy. They never regret anything that they do. And I think one of the things that makes this show's portrayal of it so interesting is that, one, you get to see and hear and experience the voices. The flashes and shots of ghosts or demonic versions of the voices in Powder's head. The way they portray her as actually responding to the voices during confrontation. During serious action scenes, she'll turn around and tell somebody that's not there to shut up. The fact that even at the end of the show, she's having these like crying breakdowns when you can tell she clearly wants to stop, and she clearly does acknowledge on some level that what she's doing is wrong. And she also wants to be with Vi. Like, she wants to trust Vi, but she is unable to. And I think what makes this show so great is that it allows you to, while acknowledging that person has done terrible things, it doesn't glorify the terrible things they do. It doesn't show the event or the thing Powder does in a way that makes you go, I want to see this girl get punched in the face. Because you look at a character that I think she really reminded me of that point, which was the Joker. The Joker is typically written as a guy who is so evil and so deranged, and even though he's crazy, it's mostly played off as a way to make him do things that are so unthinkably horrible that it makes you just want to see him get beat up. You don't really ever want to see Joker and Batman like hug it out. You don't want to see Batman help him, you want to see Joker get punched in the face. But this show made me only feel empathy for Powder when she did bad things. And I'll go more into all that later on when I do my Powder video. But I really just want to talk about that and how much that stood out to me. That it managed to do the insane, crazy villain trope, who's almost like a complete maniac, almost like the Joker, while also making me maintain my empathy for the character all the way through. To the point when my biggest takeaway from the season is I want that character to get help. And I think one of the best things about this is that Caitlyn never turned around to a mentally ill character and never had the moment where she's like, you may be crazy, but that doesn't matter, you need to go down. Like, there's never a thing when Caitlyn is like using the fact that Powder is crazy to justify wanting to kill her, or it's like, she gets so angry that she's like, I need to kill the monster. See, what you often see with characters like the Joker. He's just so evil that all the good guys want Batman to kill him. That particularly just really stood out to me. And I'll talk about more of that in my Powder video. But moving on to the next character I want to talk about, I think this is going to be the obvious one, and probably the last big one before I go into my overall thoughts on the show, Vi. Vi is a character I actually didn't really warm up to until after the time skip. Probably because, as I mentioned earlier, if you've seen Gurren Lagann, I got very strong Simone and Kamina vibes in the beginning, where while I really liked Vi, I very much felt she was going down a predictable character route. Like, from the second episode, I was like, oh, she's gonna be evil. Like, I was convinced that the show was going to end up being good girl Powder versus bad girl Vi, which got completely flipped around, which is another thing I think the show did really well. But I mean, I remember, you can watch my reaction, I talk about her eyes a lot and how full of hatred they are, and how I thought she was gonna turn evil. Because I remember looking at her and thinking it felt a little generic. It reminded me a lot of like a more possibly to turn evil version of Kamina. And I remember thinking there's one or two things that can happen here. One, she can die, and her death would motivate Powder to become the hero, which obviously doesn't happen. Or she's going to become the main villain, which also doesn't happen. But I remember having a really hard time connecting with Vi in the beginning. I think it was partly because she felt, as I was saying, very generic. She felt like a very generic mentor character to Powder that was gonna turn evil. And I kept seeing all these scenes of like Vander taking her aside and talking to her because she was too angry. And I kept being like, this is literally every hero turned rogue story ever. Like, this is literally the same conversation Kakashi had with Sasuke before he becomes a super terrorist. This is just literally every one of these conversations ever. I feel like I've seen this in a dozen shonen manga already. I feel like I've seen it in superhero comics and everything. It just feels so bland and generic. Like, it isn't until she gets out of prison in like episode 4 or 5, and she's immediately fixated on saving her sister and helping her sister, And then I fell in love with her, because what I realized about Vi was that what makes Vi so awesome to me is that she stays on, like, I guess you could say the right side. The morality in this show is very gray, but she stays one of the good ones. Basically the entire time. In spite of the fact that she has all the qualities to be the one that turns bad. In fact, I think one of the coolest things is that the one with all the anger and the quality to turn and join the villain is the one who stays on the opposite side, and her sister, who has all the qualities of becoming the main protagonist and being like the hero, is the one that loses her mind and becomes evil. And then her interacting with Caitlyn are so much fun. I'm pretty sure there's a romance implied there, especially I heard that in the games it's very strongly implied they're in a relationship. But her interacting with Caitlyn were great. I really, really liked her learning to let go of her prejudice against topsiders. Like, she had this prejudice against them, that they're all bad, that they're all living up there, fully aware of what's going on in Undercity. And I really like how through Caitlyn, she realizes that a lot of the people up there just don't know. Yeah, it's ignorant, and yeah, that's still terrible, but at the very least, they're not all monsters who are literally eating 5 meals a day, laughing about how children are dying on the streets. I really like how Caitlyn and her kind of destroyed their prejudices of both the top side and the lower city. It's just so clever, and it's such a great way to really prove that this can work. It gives the viewer in a story that is really drowned in desperation and sadness and loss, that there is hope for the two vastly different groups of people from two different classes that live vastly different lifestyles to learn to get along. It's also cool because the moment she picks up those gauntlets, she instantly becomes like one of the coolest characters with the coolest movesets ever. Like, I love the way Vi fights. Like, straight up, going back to the animation, any fight Vi had, chef kiss. They're beautiful. But moving on from the character of Vi, I just want to bring up that the show is paced spectacularly. There's never a point where you want to stop watching. I basically watched the entire series in 3 days. All those reactions that were recorded and went up on YouTube, those were all recorded in the time span of like 3 days. And I had other videos I wanted to be doing, but I just couldn't stop watching. I was just in shock, and I kept wanting to see what happened, especially to Vi and Powder at the end. I was like, I need to know what happened to these two sisters. I need to know. Like, it's such a well-paced drama. That's another major credit I had to give it, that the biggest pull for this show is the drama. This is a drama, and I think it's really interesting how with all the supernatural stuff going on, with all the magic and the politics and the action scenes, the thing that pulls people into this show is the drama. Like, the thing that pulled me into it is never who's gonna win in the war, who's gonna win a fight. It's phenomenal that at the end of this show, I'm not really interested in what's going on with the rest of the world. All I really care about are the 3 characters at that tea party. Like, they do an incredible job at making me invested in the interpersonal relationships and safety of these characters. Like, I am more interested in what happened to Caitlyn than I am what happened to anybody on the council or anybody in the city. Because the emotional hook of the series at the end of episode 9 lies with those 3 characters. And I just was constantly blown away by this show. Normally when I go into a review, I have bad things to say about a show. Like, normally I try not to be a person who's like, this show is perfect, but this show is basically perfect. I only literally have one small criticism. Literally, I have one bad thing to say about the show, and that's that I think the pacing in episode 2 is really slow. I think the pacing in episode 2, with the introduction of Jace and the tech, it just gets pretty slow. But honestly, it's needed and I don't care. The thing is, they perfectly make up for it with how big of a role all the things set up in that episode play later on. You needed to make sure we as viewers understood and processed a lot of lore in that episode, because that lore would guide the rest of the season. And that's something I really like about the show in terms of the way it uses lore. Allegedly, from what I understand, the show is answering questions that players of the game have had. For example, I don't think it had been confirmed in the game that Vi and Powder were sisters. It had been strongly implied and people theorized that they were, but I don't think they knew that. So while the show is definitely answering questions from the fans of the game, it never feels like that. Everything introduced feels natural. It feels like it would have a place being introduced in this show. There's never a point when I'm watching and I feel like a certain scene wasn't made for me and was made specifically for players of the game. I would only find out later that all the weapons they use in this show at the very end, like the rocket launcher, the powered up gauntlet, the hammer, those are all the weapons the characters have in the game. And that like the shield Vine using with her hammer is her passive in the game. Like it's so brilliantly done because you as a viewer have no idea. And my only worry for the show, and I'll probably go into this in another Arcane video, is that I worry that they're going to follow the games, which I hope they don't do, because that means that we know how everything ends. Like, I don't want to know how the Vi, Jinx, Caitlyn story ends. Even if I don't care about Jace, I don't want to know what's going to happen to him or Victor. I don't want to know. I want to find out. I want this to continue to be a really well-made, unique story focused on interpersonal character relationships. Because as far as I can tell right now, this is a completely original story, and I don't want to have to worry about adhering to the game. I don't want it to adhere to anything and try to stick down a path even though there's a better path for the story to go. But guys, I loved Arcane. If that wasn't clear by the title, by the thumbnail, and by the fact that I've just been talking how much I like everything in it for like 30 minutes now, well yeah, I really like Arcane. I hope you enjoyed watching me react to it and watching it yourself. Please tell me your thoughts on Arcane in the comment section down below. You can also check out my PayPal and my Twitter in the description box down below if you want to follow me there or support the channel. But if you don't want to do either of those things and you have nothing to say in the comments, could you just leave the video a like for me? I know less people are doing that since YouTube got rid of the dislike button for some reason. Infuriating, I know, I hate it too. But if you could just do that, it does help out the channel, so please do that. And even though you're subscribed, if you want to make extra sure you get notifications when I release a video, hit the bell as well. And above all else, guys, most importantly, have a great day. This is Nerd King 101, signing out.